Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for spending time with me again today on Interviews. I'm very excited because I'm busy building out the playlist for community managers so that we can get a bigger behind the scenes idea of what it means to be an online community manager. And today I have Rachel, who is going to tell us more about her communities and how she became a community manager. So over to you, Rachel. How did you start your journey as a community manager?
Well, thank you, Melanie, for having me. So excited to talk to all of your people around the world and especially in South Africa about community and entrepreneurship and all of that stuff. So, my journey actually began in real life. Um, I majored in cultural anthropology in college, and I have a master's degree in social work with a focus on community partnerships. And so we think of social work as sort of the clinical kind of one-to-one fix a problem for a one person kind of thing.
Yes.
The angle I took was, how do we address things on a community level, a society level, big picture problem solving? And the answer is always in the community, right? It's
Yes.
like every community has its own flavor, its own resources, its own culture. So, anyway, before I go on like a philosophical tangent, it was early 2000s when I was in college and 9/11 happened. And I'm in America, in case you can't tell. And the war on terror was upon us, and I was not excited about that. And so we all got in the streets. I was in Atlanta, Georgia at the time, which is, a major cultural center for resistance and civil rights. Even up until this day, the legacy of MLK and the SLC and all the organizing forces are still there. So we got out in the streets and we were protesting this war. And after a while, it was like, okay, what can we do that's constructive? Being anti will take a lot out of you. And there's so much to be anti about.
Mm.
And we were the bicyclists in Atlanta, and we were biking around with our signs that said, no blood for oil, right? Okay, so what can we do constructively around this idea? Well, let's start a bicycle repair shop, a nonprofit where we share tools and we get bike parts donated. If you have a bike, great. If you need to build a bike, cool. And we'll help each other fix our bikes or build a bike to ride. And we'll get more people on bikes in Atlanta, which was known as one of the worst cities for cycling in America at the time. And so now, if you go to Atlanta, totally a bike town. So So we had this nonprofit. It was fantastic. I got really involved in other community projects because I found, you can kind of do anything. You can kind of get away with stuff. You can convince people to let you do, kind of off the wall events if you just make friends with them. So I made friends with my city council members and they let me throw a dance party, a DJ dance party at our downtown train station
Okay.
when yeah, they were threatening to cut bus service, like, on Saturdays, which would be terrible because people
Yes.
rely on public transportation, and so, being a transportation advocate, I was like, "No, no." So I was in my 20s, so, I managed to convince my city council representative, Kwanzaa Hall, to let me organize a DJ dance party at at this downtown train station in Atlanta, Georgia, and, we did, and we had this big rally, and it was like it was something. Um, and so that's what I learned in real life, and then I actually became a DJ myself, and learned how to build community that way, learned how to tap into not necessarily the political on the surface, but just like what makes people feel good, what makes people move, how do you affect people in the moment, how do you make a decision moment to moment that's going to keep people moving and socializing and buying drinks, that's part of it. But of course, music
So,
is
so
yeah.
may I interrupt you here
Yeah,
and,
please
and just
interrupt me because
ask
I
a
can talk
DJ
forever.
related question?
Okay.
So I've had these conversations with DJs before, and it seems as though DJs come from two schools of thought. There is the one school of thought that is very much like what you're describing here, where it's we listen to what the audience wants and we connect with that. And there's the other
Mhm.
school of DJ thought that says, I create great music and people should just go along with that.
Mhm. Okay, because you know my style of community management. I swear this connects to Facebook groups if you just stay with me for a second.
Yes,
But
yes, I'm
this
very
is
curious to hear how you
okay.
connect this.
Okay, here's like the golden thread between these things. Here it comes. Okay. So my perspective on Facebook groups is it's a community, not a classroom. Not that people won't learn, they will. Like a good educator knows that the community is the classroom. But, kind of for the rest of us who aren't kind of steeped in, the philosophy of education, right? Culturally, a classroom is where you sit down and shut up, right?
Yes.
So we have this idea in Facebook groups, especially for us service providers, people who want our members to buy from us. You have this idea that we have to like provide value in the form of instructional content, right? Like we feel like we have to give value by explaining all the things. We write very long posts explaining stuff and nobody comments, nobody likes, it gets like no engagement. And then we're heartbroken. It's like, oh, I'm giving you the world on a silver platter. Why don't you take it? I spent all of this time making this for you. Why don't you want it? And it's like, well, who asked you? And what I found is that in my Facebook group and all the people that I've worked with, just start conversations that are relevant. I mean, you can kind of float around and make it fun and talk about things you like and blah, blah, blah. But like, like 80 20 rule, I like, 80% like on topic, on brand, talking about the things that have to do with your community. And there's this idea that like, as the administrator of our group, we have to present ourselves as the expert, but I like to cast my members as the experts as well. Like let's be on an equal playing field here. I have an area of expertise, you have an area of expertise. Like let's kind of meet in the middle and see where our stuff lines up and where we can help each other. So instead of me telling them a thing, like stop doing this is a mistake. I mentioned these things, but later, like on the heels of having that conversation, I'll kick it to them. Like, for example, I asked recently, what do you think about 5-day challenges? To see what people said. And the consensus was, 5-day challenges are too long. We prefer a 3-day challenge. 5-day challenges were great during pandemic times, but now it's like we're busy again. And that way you get like a much richer conversation. And then I can kind of take all of those replies and say, all right, now I know what to create content about that's going to hit hard.
Mm,
And you can
mm,
repurpose that outside of the group. So I can do this sort of focus group in my group, right? And I find out what the prevailing attitude is. And then I can sum it up in a post. So everybody kind of gets the wrap up. And then I can take that into a reel, or I can take it into a guest expert session, or I can take it into my own event and go, okay, I know my group members don't want a 5-day challenge. And the next launch event I do will be 3 days, like they're asking for.
mm,
And so this kind of responsive thing, it goes back to the idea of call and response, which is like a big
mm,
part of it, American music going back to like slavery times, the way music was done, like out in the fields, a call and response, which,
mm,
more like found its way into the church, into gospel music, into
mm,
blues, into jazz,
mm,
into rock, and hip hop.
mm,
This call and response thing goes way, way back, and
mm,
it works, and it builds a connection between people. It builds trust between people. And it goes back to sort of like, just basic building blocks of culture. And it
mm,
works because culture is this enduring thing, throughout human history.
mm,
Um, so I'm kind of working with the human condition,
mm, mm,
this is what we want at our core. This is what we are wired to want.
mm,
And so right. So being a DJ. So this is my approach to DJing is like, okay, I'm gonna feel out the crowd. I know what I like to do. I know where I vibe out the best. People come to me for that. I'll start playing songs that I like, and I get to know my DJ fans, right? And I know what they like. I'll put on songs for them because you play in the same place enough times, you know people, blah, blah, blah. Even the bartender, you put on their song, they get excited. And then you just feed off of that because to me, it's all one big song. All of like
I
modern
love
music
that.
is
All one
one
big song.
it's all one big song because it's all built on the same building blocks of music. You know, it's like generally 4/4 time, maybe a little 3/4. We're like working in the same scales and modes and like rhythms and things. And if you track the history of music, like if you look at like the development of hip hop, for example, and so then we go to Jamaica and we look at reggae, and then we go to Africa and we look at the music that came from Africa. And then we kind of loop back around to Afro beats today, which has this sort of Caribbean vibe. And then meanwhile, in England, you get like big beat and you get ska and like it's all one big family tree of humans expressing themselves.
Mm, mm.
And I would even go as far as saying like it's oh it's counterculture because okay, in Facebook groups, this is like way philosophical. I'm really happy we're going
Loving it,
here.
loving
And
it, loving
you're not
it.
stopping me. So people get kind of like ants in their pants in Facebook groups about the rules. You know, people have to read the rules, remember the rules, abide by the rules. Why don't they respect the rules? And then if somebody does something kind of anti-community, but it doesn't exactly break a rule, the admin's like, well, they didn't break a rule. I don't know what to do. Meanwhile, this person's like causing a mess in the group.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The rules are kind of like terms and conditions, kind
Yes.
of, but rules don't create culture directly. Actually, rules create counterculture, right? Like culture comes from resistance a lot of the time because rules are beset upon people in oppressive kind of ways. And so we get culture and we get music and we get art out of the oppressive just the oppressive way that rules are enforced on people, right? Because there's a ruling
Yes.
class that make the rules, and they're generally subjugate the people that are just trying to function, you know?
Yes.
So the rules are important from a moderation perspective, just so you have something to fall back on if you're going to decline with feedback, just basic stuff. But I would never, ever, 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 ever expect, especially when there's like literally millions and millions of Facebook groups and people are people, I'm in like hundreds of them. I don't know. Like I don't remember all the rules of every single freaking group I'm in, but like we all know, like we can all just sort of agree that kindergarten rules apply
Yes.
across the board, right? Like we
Yes.
all can behave like 5-year-olds, right?
Yes.
Like we can keep our hands in our feet ourselves. Um, and so sidestep from this, I just kind of want to put this out there too. The thing where people are like, well, they didn't break a rule explicitly, so I don't know what to do. But meanwhile, this person is just creating static friction, like being negative in the group in whatever way. There's an implicit rule in communities that if somebody acts in an anti-community kind of way, you got to rein them in. That's your job. And I feel like it's kind of a cop out when admins and moderators don't just like deal with it. You know, you don't have to have an explicit rule. If somebody's acting in an anti-community way, they're making it hard for you to admin or moderate your group, they're bothering other people, then they have broken the implicit rule of not of like being anti-community, and
Get
you can
along.
go ahead and handle that,
Yes.
please.
I hear you. I hear you on that one. I hear you on that one totally. And I've had a similar learning curve in my groups early when I started and I didn't want to get into those trenches with things. It was a mess.
Mhm.
And I eventually said to them, we can't sit and argue about this in the team. We just got to make some decisions. But I've also
Mhm.
found so when I work with my teams, I find it takes most moderators about 2 years to get comfortable with using the block switch.
Mm.
Most of us feel as though it's an act of aggression. And I think there's something that we can work on in the framing there, because a lot of people feel that a block is an act of aggression, when in fact a block is an act of self-care. Uh,
Yes.
So I think that when I work with my teams, I try to reframe it for them in that way so that they understand that this is not an aggressive act. This is an act of self-care so that we protect our own energy uh, for more positive pursuits. Our time is limited. We should curate how we spend it.
I agree. I could talk about this a lot. Like, I'm super passionate about moderating your group effectively. And part of it is I did not know what I was doing in the beginning. And also, Facebook's moderation tools have really improved in very recent history. So we have more automations that we can put in place so you, the person, don't have to take the action anymore. You can build it in with Admin Assist. Although I think they renamed Admin Assist to something else recently, but there's automations. You can set keywords, you can slow down the commenting if things get out of hand. But I think the most important thing for admins and moderators to internalize is that, like, you are the regulator. That's your
Mm,
job. When you decide to lead a community and moderate a community, this is your job description, is to enforce the boundaries and the guidelines and protect the integrity of the group. And sometimes that means, you know, making a difficult decision, which becomes easier over time. And I experienced this in real life
mm,
at the bike shop, which was a real physical place, people went to. And because it was a pay what you want nonprofit kind of community, like micro community center, we got people from all, like, I'm telling you, all walks of life. Like,
mm,
we had homeless people and we had like police officers like working together, which was kind of a trip. We had neighborhood kids, and then we had like, us like hipsters, and like we were all just kind of coming together in this real like microcosm of Atlanta at the time, early 2000s. So it's like all different kinds of people. And those of us running the place, we're those rah, like no blood for oil activist types, fresh
mm.
out of college and grad school and things. And so we had our ideas about, how the world works and whatever. And so people would come in there, and because of our politics, we would say like, everybody's welcome here, as long as you abide by these. We had rules on the wall that were like, be nice, be chill, don't take tools out of anybody's hands, like all these things. But people would do like really kind of weird things, like hoarding parts and just saying like unsavory things. And we didn't want to police anybody that hard, but the red flags always led up to a big meltdown.
Mm,
Like, it
mm,
never failed. Like, the red flag behavior of people were like, really were red flags. And we let it go for too long until it became such a situation that we had no choice but to deal with it. And by that time, it was something uglier than it
mm.
it could, like, we could have nipped it in the bud much sooner, earlier on. We could have handled it. And we're, not confrontational ourselves, and
Mm, mm,
function of our age and experience and stuff. But things got like really not good, and I will admit, because we did not address the red flag behavior in the moment. And so that's why, now that I'm doing this thing with Facebook groups, I'm just like, get them out of here. Like, hand
mm.
we're done,
So,
but in yeah, go ahead.
so what what
Interrupt me.
what is red flag behavior for you? Because I think that will be useful for people watching.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's certain things that are like kind of obvious. Like, nobody in your group should be DMing or private messaging or emailing another member of your group without asking permission first.
Mm,
it's like consent,
mm,
and all the
mm,
ways that we ask for consent, and all the ways that
mm.
someone wants to uh get, physically or energetically or professionally closer to you. There's
Yes.
all these sort of checkpoints where it's like, it would be appropriate at this point to ask if I can go a step farther in this
Yes.
relationship, right? You all know what I mean, right? So, it if
Consent is a
someone,
conversation we can get. I can carry on with for days.
yeah, yeah, and consent really applies. Consent should be part of the sales process.
Yes.
It's all human relationships. At the end of the day, human relationship is human relationship. Um, And it all kind of works the same way. So if you meet somebody in a Facebook group and you want to get to know them better, your options are just continue the conversation in the group.
Mm,
You could maybe send them a friend request, but really like let them know in that public conversation, hey, is it cool
mm,
if I send you a friend request? And then, hey, is
mm,
it cool if I send you a DM? It's kind of like if you're on a dating app and you meet somebody and they sound interesting, but you're going to meet in a public place before you meet in a private place. Because at least in a public place, there are witnesses to what's going on. Because so, do that, right? In the comments in the Facebook group, you can say, this is great. I really like to be in your world some more. Can I send you a friend request?
mm,
And then the other person has the option at that point to say, you know what? No, my friends list is really closed, but you could get in my Facebook group
mm,
instead. And that's, that's something that I do because sometimes you kind of need like a moat between you and people sometimes. So
yes.
I use my personal profile to do a lot, to send traffic to my group. I
Mm,
use reels from my profile to attract people to my group, or from reels to my profile to my group. I'm thinking about traffic a lot of the time. But I'm not necessarily trying to build my friends list
mm,
on my profile. In fact, I have my profile set to professional mode, which is a new thing that Facebook or Meta has rolled out kind of recently to not everybody, but so now I can have followers on my personal profile rather than friends, which is nice. If you're building a personal brand on Facebook, there's got to be a little bit of a barrier, I think,
mm,
between you and because
mm.
some people
So, so, so do you have a story of us about some people that's like somebody did something that you were like, it was so way beyond what
I
you
have a
understand
couple.
as normal behavior for Facebook?
Oh, and I will say this, like, what's the saying? There are no angels in hell. Like, I, we all mess up sometimes. I have made mistakes. I have spoken out of term. I have offended people. I have apologized to people. I've said, oh no, that wasn't the thing to say. Things come across wrong on social media. People don't know your personality. And I work internationally, and I am like East Coast American, Jewish, like loud, in your face, blunt. And to some people, I'm rude as hell. And to me, and to like my family, like this is our regular volume, So there's definitely like culture clash a little bit sometimes. So like I'm not saying I'm squeaky clean, none of us are. Maybe you are, Melanie, because you're like literally the nicest person in the
No,
world.
no, not
I
at
don't know
all.
who can
No, not at
out of you.
all. I lose my stuff a lot.
You know, there's like a lot of pressure in the world, and we all lived through a pandemic. It's not really over. Like, let's just kind of put all our cards on the table. We all get stressed out sometimes and
Mm,
kind of lose our cool. And
mm.
so everybody I've ever offended, I'm sorry. Truly.
Have you
Okay.
listened to that podcast, Conversations with People Who Hate Me?
Oh my God. No.
Uh,
That
um,
sounds amazing.
yeah, so it was a podcast. I haven't listened in a while, so I can't remember all the detail. But a podcaster who was getting lots of hate mail, um, eventually created a podcast out of conversations with people who'd sent him very, very negative feedback. So
Oh my God.
it's an interesting for me, it was interesting to see how somebody had turned something that for me was such a negative experience. Like I've experienced hate mail and it's
Yeah.
kind of
What?
cyberbullying.
How? How?
No boundaries,
Okay. Oh
no
my
boundaries.
God.
Before I learned to use that block button.
Yeah. Right. Oh, and pro tip, before you block somebody on Facebook, ban them from your business page. If you have a
Yes,
business page, ban them from your business page first,
before you
then
block.
block them because I had a member of my Facebook group who was kind of clearly kind of a QAnon follower type person. And like you can tell from what I've talked about where my politics are, right? Like I'm anti-war, rather be riding a bike than driving a car. You can probably make some guesses about all the other things that I probably believe in, right?
Mm,
It's not that hard to figure this out.
mm.
And I have people in my Facebook group who we don't always agree politically.
Mm,
And as long as we can kind of come together on the idea that, well, community is a top priority and value for us, and we respect different ways of being,
mm,
we can get along. Because when you cut people out, you just push people farther into extremism of their mentality. And then the problems kind of get worse because we can't get on we have to eventually learn how to work together
mm,
in order to solve global problems.
mm,
And sometimes people we don't agree with are going to be our best allies in order to solve a problem. Like in America right now with the January 6th commission, I don't agree with Liz Cheney about everything. I was definitely not a fan of her father, obviously, because I was protesting the war on terror, but she is leading the charge with the January 6th commission. So like, yes, Liz Cheney, go for it. I'm supporting you with this. You know what I mean? So anyway, I've never thrown anybody out of my group because of who they voted for.
okay.
But this lady was like doing the QAnon thing and like talking in code, and it was the run up to January 6th, and I'm watching all of what is happening. And it was like freaky to me because she also lived kind of near me in Florida, and my address is like on my mailing list. And I don't know, like people have guns in Florida, like people get weird. And they're talking about, what they're talking about on Telegram, and they're talking in code, and like, you know, I'm Jewish. I grew up in an area with like a big KKK membership. Like we are trained to see who doesn't like us so we can get out of the way.
Mm,
Right. So, like, even though I could report these comments to Facebook and be like, this is hate speech, the algorithm's not picking it up as hate speech.
mm,
I know it is because I know what I'm looking at, but the algorithm doesn't. So
mm.
eventually I kicked this woman out of my community because I was like, I just don't want to deal with her anymore. And I didn't make a big deal out of it. I just got rid of her. But oh, she got mad. And I had already blocked her. And she went to my business page and left me the nastiest review
Mm,
full of lies. Like
mm,
about how she was my client for 2 years and blah, blah, blah.
mm.
She bought for me a $27 video. And
Wow.
I offered to refund her the $27,
Wow.
because it was like she said, I worked with you for 2 years. Like, no, you bought a video 2 years ago for $27. If you haven't finished it by now, I'm really sorry. Do you want your $27 back? Or, if you I'll donate it to Stacey Abrams, like, or Planned Parenthood. So so I actually unblocked her so I could address her comment. We went back and forth for a while, and it was like, this is a waste of my time. Get out of my life. So now I have my reviews on my business page turned off
Mm,
because she screwed up my reviews.
mm, mm.
Whatever, man. Yeah.
So it's very interesting. We had a page for my big group that's got 100,000 members on now, and somewhere around 20,000 members. I remember we ditched the page because of all the bad reviews. Because anyone we kicked out of the group came back onto the page and left a bad review for us. And I eventually shut it down completely. I think I archived it. And then years later, I created a page for the group again when Facebook then said they're adding shops. Uh, that ability to add reviews on pages, I think, is very, very dangerous as a business owner to use, because anybody out there who's having a bad day will
Mhm.
use it to abuse you, and you have no recourse once that negative review is up. You can't remove
Mhm. I think there's a way to appeal to get it taken down if it's not true at this point, but don't quote me on that.
and you still have to prove that. How do you you've still got
I don't I haven't used it. I wound up just turning my reviews off
yes,
because I was like, forget it, I don't have time for this.
yes,
But now part of my process when I'm removing somebody from my world, first thing is ban from my page before I do anything else.
yes. So, Rachel, I see we only have 5 minutes left. And I'm
We
pretty
can talk
certain we're going to chat again. There's so many conversations I want to have with you around social development. So
Mhm.
this was just the beginning. Thank you so much for your time. Uh,
Thank you.
any parting comments before we close?
Yes, well, if anybody watches this before the first week of September 2022, I am hosting a fest of growing our Facebook groups with reels. So 3 days, because I know nobody likes a 5-day challenge. And it's not a challenge, it's a fest. It's fun. And come sign up at rockyourtribe.com/reels or come find me on Facebook, Rachael Spiewak, or my Facebook group, Rock Your Tribe Community Building for Business Leaders, and sign up for the fest. It's going to be super fun, super simple, and it's not about lip syncing. It's not about dancing. We don't have to do anything trendy. It's just easy reels showing up, talking about how awesome your Facebook group is, who it's for, why they should join, and getting those people from out there beyond your network in Reels land and getting them into your Facebook group. It's going to be awesome.
That's awesome. I am signed up for the Reels Fest myself. I was struggling with Reels for a while. I'm getting better at them. So this has come at a perfect time for me. Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate it so very much. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today. I appreciate it so much. I know that all of the community managers watching are going to take a lot of learning from what you've said today. I appreciate it so very much.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for allowing me to go to these sort of like cultural spaces and things that I really like to think about. That it takes a really special person who wants to talk to me about this stuff. So I really appreciate you for this.
I know we're going to do this again. Get
Kindred
ready.
spirits.
Have a great day.
Bye. Thank you.